Mike. Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1074 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. StickerU.com. Create custom stickers, labels, tattoos, and decals for your home and your business. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Doer, the world's most comfortable pants and shorts. Save 15% with the promo code TorontoMike. Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. And Canna Cabana, the lowest prices on cannabis. Guaranteed. Over 100 stores across the country. Learn more at cannacabana.com. Joining me for another progressive past of modern melodies, as always, is Brother Bill and Cam Gordon. Welcome back, guys.
Hello.
Thank you for having us back, Mike.
It's been a while since we've done one of these.
Cam, you bailed on Toast with Stu Stone and I. I want to know how you're feeling.
This is a Toronto Mike exclusive. I actually came down with COVID right as we were about to record for the second time. And let me tell you, the second time was way worse than the first time.
Really?
It fucking sucked. Yeah.
Really?
I was like really kind of wrecked for definitely for like about 48 hours. It was like pretty gnarly, and I'm pretty good about not getting sick, but yeah, it kind of fucked me up.
Are we Cam, are we talking about like were you in bed, like couldn't get out of bed kind of thing?
More or less, like kind of like the whole kind of poo-poo platter of symptoms. Like I kind of ran through them all, like the chills, and then I got all sweaty, and I had a headache, I had a sore throat, and a lot of phlegm, a lot of horking was going on.
That's enough.
Yeah, no, but it was pretty bad. Also, for a second time, like neither my daughter nor my girlfriend got it, so I don't know, unless there's some kind of like biological warfare in my household or something. I'm not sure why that is, but I'm grateful at the same time. Because
I asked that question because I never got COVID so far, knock on wood. But I had H1N1. I had bird flu about 10 years ago, and it knocked me on my rear end for a week.
Holy shit!
And almost put me in the hospital a couple of times. So that was a bad one too. So I'm here. Different things about COVID, people say, "Oh, I had a cough," and then my girlfriend had a cough, and she was fine for the duration, the 7 days or whatever. She stayed home, and I never got it. And it's
God, what
so
a one upper. I had I had bird flu.
Yeah, trust me, I'm not bragging.
Scott's gonna say he had like
nice.
SARS.
Scott had
monkeypox. I was going to ask you, Cam, about how many shots did you have? Just curious.
3.
Yeah.
3. Yeah.
And you, brother?
I've had 3. And
me
for
too.
A 4th. Yeah, by the end of summer.
I had 3 and I got COVID.
Now,
you
Scott,
did too.
But not till about 3 months ago I got it.
Scott, I haven't introduced you yet. People are like, who the hell is this guy? So stand by. So Cam, are you feeling, what are you now, 95%? Where are you?
Yeah, like I'm pretty much back to normal and like working out again and doing tons like yourself, Mike, as you know, I'm pretty avid biker. So I've been biking around downtown again for like last week. So
good for you.
It's all good now. But would rather not get that again if I can help it. It's amazing, Mike. You have all these like literally strangers coming down to your basement all the time, low ceilings and like no ventilation. you've never got it. Like,
As far as I know, I've never got COVID. I don't believe in knocking on wood, or I'd be slamming my head against it right now. But Cam, I don't want what you got, and I don't even know if I'm being careful anymore, but I get all my shots. I'll get if they let me have a fourth, I'm going to run and get a fourth. I can't wait to do that. But I'm glad you're feeling better, Cam. Can't wait to get you back here for Toast in July. It's coming before you know it. Brother, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Went for another job. Didn't get another job.
That's a song. That's a song.
Yeah. There's a new smooth jazz / AC station starting here in Vancouver, and I managed to get a couple of interviews in before they decided that they didn't want to go with me, which is fine. I won't lie to you. I fucking hate jazz. It's my least favorite music of all time.
Johnny hates jazz.
Right.
Yeah. Right. But I was hoping to get back in the industry, and I still am. And I'm not in the industry right now. I'm currently working for something called BCL, which is the people that supply you with your liquor here in British Columbia. And it's a pretty good gig for me. So going to take a lot for me to get back into the radio business at this point. So.
That's the LCBO of British Columbia, essentially.
Correct. Yes. Correct. Okay. It's British Columbia liquor.
Now you can't buy Great Lakes in BC, but you can buy them at LCBOs here in this fine province. This is Toronto Mike. So I'm going to crack open a Sunnyside IPA right on the mic here.
Yeah.
Now let me introduce this guy, because I know he's got things to say. He doesn't have a great microphone, but you know what? He's full of good content, so I'll put up with it. This month, gentlemen. This month, we're diving deep into dance music and Toronto's club scene of the 80s and 90s. And to help us do that, we're bringing in a subject matter expert, someone who was there.
Right.
See what I did there, brother? That's for you, man. Welcome back to Toronto Mic'd, Scot Turner.
Thank you, Toronto Mike. Hello, guys. Hello. Nice to be here. Thank you. Hi, everybody. And nice to be back, Toronto Mike.
When you listen back, Scott, you're going to be like, I wish I had a mic as good as Brother Bill. That's what you're going to do.
You know what? It's the only time in my life where my voice has sounded better than Scott Turner.
That was good.
The only time, man.
You're too kind. Thank you. Yeah, this does sound awful, doesn't it?
You know what, though?
I'll fix it.
On with the show. How is your ticker? How's the heart?
Really good, thank you. For those that didn't know, I had a quadruple bypass just over a year and a half ago. I thought I was okay, but I had known that I had high cholesterol, but I thought, I'm a vegan, I'm cycling, I'm good. I knew clearly there was a family history, but I ignored it, so it's partly my fault. But then I had some issues cycling where I felt something wasn't right, went into the doctor, bunch of tests later, I had 4 blockages, wow. one at 90%, 2 at 80%, 1 at 50%. And my cardiologist said, stop cycling immediately. I went in for surgery, quadruple bypass. And it's quite a surgery. So it took me a while to recover, but I'm back to normal now on medication. I've got to be on this cholesterol statin. I have to. Yeah.
If my doctor told me to stop cycling immediately, I'd give him the finger, tell him to fuck off, and I would just die.
Exactly. So it's just family history is, they talk about hereditary factors in health, and you got to pay attention to that, because it was very, very clear that I was kind of ignoring, and, altruistically, I wanted to just, I can beat this. And, sometimes you got to pay attention to the doctors.
Was there any symptoms at all, Scott? Like, did you feel faint after you rode a certain distance or anything like that? Nothing.
No, the weird thing was I had done a couple of 100K rides, at a pretty decent pace. And I felt fine. It was a few weeks after I went for a shorter ride, and I thought it was a lung infection, because my lungs felt kind of cold. It's weird. And I kept going back to the doctor, and they said, well, try this puffer. And I said, I was completing the rides. I was not like gasping for air. I was not like, oh my God, that was killing me. I was still doing the rides, but something didn't feel right. And a series of tests, some of the tests were okay. And then the conclusive test was what they call an angiogram, and they stick this fluid through your body, and they're really that way they're able to tell where the blockages are, which they did. And it was like, all the red lights went off. It was like, whoop, whoop, whoop.
Oh,
Yeah.
boy.
And I guess because I was a vegan, maybe because I was exercising and cycling so much, looking after myself, relatively healthy, it probably saved my life. But at some point, had I continued without the medication, I probably would have had a heart attack at some
So
point.
this was 100% like a hereditary thing. This had nothing to do with like overworking your heart or like blood pressure. Or, wow.
No, I did never had high blood pressure. Never. No. So yeah, and I mean it was there. All the signs were there. My dad died of a heart attack. His brother died of a heart attack. Like all the men down the family tree, like they barely made it to 55, 60. I should have paid attention, right? So
you know what, Scott? You should have preemptively had it checked out if everybody's dropping dead in their 50s.
Yeah, you think, eh? Yeah, but anyway.
Well, Scott, I'm glad you're better. Are you back?
I'm glad you're still here.
You. Seriously, I don't have time to do a mockumentary on the life and times of Scot Turner, so I need you to live along.
Move on. Yeah, but thank you for asking. I'm doing fine. Thank you so much.
Are you back to biking though? Like, are you back to?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I'm not Toronto Mike biking.
Well,
good God.
I'm
amazed.
I don't do 100 at a time. Like today, I did 42. I think I did 57 yesterday, but I never go for 100. I don't have time.
Yeah, I haven't done that in some time, but I do 30 kind of 40K rides, but you're out almost every day, right?
Yeah, I am out every day actually. I had 1200K for June 2022 because I just came back from
I will say that, Mike, we've talked about this, and like around 5 years I've known you, not counting the 10 years you ignored all my PR emails to you.
Completely ignored.
The most fucked up bike ride you ever did is when we went to see Ron Hawkins at the Only in February. It's like 11 o'clock. And you're like biking back at like 11:30 from the East End here in Toronto to your home.
Oh, and it was a snowstorm.
Psychopath. And there was a snowstorm.
Yeah. That was about, I don't know what that was, around 50K round trip, but it was a snowstorm. But you know what? I don't have that, sensible, like, switch that says, oh, it's bad conditions, don't go. Like I go rain, shine, snow, like I just fucking go, and I love it. And I love it. I love a late night ride home in shitty conditions after seeing a great show. Like that's my high, man. That's my heroin.
Yeah.
And only one fractured wrist.
One,
so far.
And a chipped pinky, but okay. Okay. So guys, we got to get to business here. In the past, we've gone deep on the subjects of punk, metal, new wave, and hip-hop in Canada. Today, it's dance music with a focus on Toronto's club scene of the 80s and 90s. It was going to be rave culture in Toronto, but that, it turns out, was a much bigger fish, and we're going to save that one for later when Scott can round up even more subject matter experts for us. So that one's going to be coming soon. But our very first episode, guys, was entitled CFN Why Not? So in the spirit of that episode, I do have a lingering question from that one. And I think with Scot Turner here, who of course was at CFNY.
Mike,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but can I just make a comment? This is mainly for Bill's sake, but this is actually a callback to a past episode. Sure. A final comment about why having COVID this time was shitty.
Yeah.
It meant that I missed a concert from Canadian hardcore punk legends DOA that we discussed at length on the episode with Ralph Alfonso, and knowing that Joey Shithead and friends, mainly Joey, is not getting any younger, I was very sad to miss that, because who knows when they'll be back. Although they'll probably play like 3 more concerts.
Oh, they play all the time.
On the road, but
yeah, they play all the time out here. So they're
Cam, I'm glad.
He's not being a counselor, he's on the road.
I'm glad you interrupted me mid-sentence with that important information here. But here's the question that came in from Will. Did CFNY play Glass Tiger?
No. One word answer. No.
Okay.
Just no. Wait a minute. That was into the 90s, wasn't it?
No,
late 80s.
80s.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Mid to late.
I want to say for that 2 or 3 month period when we were playing top 40 there, Scott, we may have played it once or twice.
Okay, we won't count that. That's sure.
No.
Yeah, we won't count that. Okay.
But but that is a good important question, and you know what? As brief as that period was, it really sticks out. And when when you talk a CFNY story of that era, that Spirit of Radio era, that comes up all the time, and people confuse the dates. They definitely confuse the period of time it was, but it was brief. I think it was in all. It was maybe a year, a little more, like a couple of months more than a year. Yeah. Very brief, and we went right back. Even probably you could argue we went back more alternative and more freeform than we were before that. But it sticks out. It sticks out because yes, we played Madonna. Right. You know, and we probably maybe we did play Glass Tiger, so perhaps that.
All I remember is Johnny Kemp just got paid, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And I had just started at CFNY at that time, so it was right in the heyday. I mean, I wanted to work at the Spirit of Radio, and instead I worked at CFTR.
Well, yeah, they were playing like George Michael's Monkey.
Yeah, I think
Janet Jackson.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, and I think Def Leppard, because some people keep reminding me of that, and I go, really? And I think, and I go, okay, maybe, and you're right, Glass Tiger. I'm like, no, there's no way. But you know what? Maybe in that little period of time, but partly, good point, Mike. It probably shouldn't count.
I don't think we should. I think that's like an outlier. We just won't count that for any of our CF and whatnot. But this is not. Go ahead.
I'm just trying to think. Could Glass Tiger at all be considered alternative? Like they did that song with Rod Stewart.
No, their biggest hit has Bryan Adams on it. Like that's not alternative, right? Like Don't Forget Me When I'm Gone has got Bryan Adams all over it.
Yeah. What about the song Diamond Sun or something? Remember that jam?
Yeah, of course, but no.
Was that alternative? Like the Celtic? It's like,
if that's alternative, what's not alternative? Like then it's like
it sounds like the Pogues.
Then I guess Phil Collins is alternative. I guess everybody's alternative.
Yes. Genesis, very
and you were confused back then. You should hear what it sounds like now. We just launched a new radio station here today called Sonic. Well, I didn't personally. It's a third alt rock station in the market.
Wow.
And I'm listening to it today, and with the exception of the stuff from that I remember from the 90s, the stuff they play now, I don't know what it is. I don't know if you like Cam asks. I don't know if I'd consider it alt. I'm like, it's just kind of drone music to me. It's all one level, kind of Mumford & Sons and that Hey Ho band or whatever. The
Lumineers. Yeah.
Lumineers.
Right.
Yeah.
That stuff. I'm like, okay, that's alternative now. Okay, that's cool, but it's not my thing, that's for sure.
Okay, so I'm going to do a very short rant about this new Vancouver station, which is called Sonic. Okay, very short.
Please do. Yeah.
And then I'm going to pass the mic to you guys to get us started here because shout out to Blair Packham. I'm going to recede into the background and I'm ready to be educated because unlike the hip-hop episode we did, which I felt so educated on the subject matter that I felt I could do it myself. I can be the subject matter expert. I knew where we were going. I knew every beat. This time, I got to say, I'm pretty out of my comfort zone. So my quick rant is this. So they laid off all their staff, including the morning show, because they were flipping formats from the KISS format, which we have here in Toronto, to Sonic, which I'm guessing is a lot like the current Edge, or it's a lot like Edge
Indie 88.
Indie 88. Okay, right. So I know they have one in Edmonton where my wife is from. There you go. Okay, so which
is what it's they basically tried to do another version of it in the West Coast. Sorry.
No, absolutely. Glad you pointed that out.
Another version of Mike's wife?
There's only one, brother. There's only one. Okay.
It's not what I said.
Monica,
Cam, don't put words in my mouth.
I mean, I'm the only, Cam, I guess. We never worked in radio, but I know the stunting in radio. I know something you'll do in your flipping format. You'll stunt. And they started playing the radio edit, of course, because they don't want to get in trouble. They played the radio edit of Killing in the Name by Rage Against the Machine on a continuous loop. So I'm like, I think I'm tweeting, oh, they're flipping to alt. Brother Bill, you and I were DMing about this. They're flipping to alt rock. This is the stunt. They're going to play Rage Against the Machine. We'll find out what the lineup is. I know it'll include Carly Myers, who is here in our market, and FOTM Jay Brody, and we'll find out what else is going on. But then I start to people are like sending me like a Rolling Stone article and something from the UK and the Guardian, and like what I thought were kind of like legit mainstream media news sources are talking about how, oh my God, it's like Airheads, like the engineers are so mad they fired this popular morning show. They've gone rogue.
Pitchfork wrote about this.
Think about it. This is what people are like, Mike, you have to write about this. This is the coolest thing ever. They've gone fucking rogue. The engineers are playing Rage Against it, and they don't care what management wants. They're like, we're going to fucking play this all over and over because you fired this popular morning show. And I'm like, what happened to critical reasoning and looking at something and trying to find out what's the real story? Like, are these people just looking for clicks? Does anybody give a fuck about what's going on here? What's the truth? This is not rogue. This is not protest. This is a promotion, and it worked. It fucking worked because the world's gone stupid, and it worked. But why the hell is RollingStone.com writing about the rogue engineers are protesting the firing of the morning show, playing the radio edit, as if they'd play the fucking radio edit, right? And as if Rogers couldn't stop them if they were doing that for 20 minutes. You guys can speak to that in a minute. And as if I didn't tell the world already that they were flipping alt rock and this was their thing to get your attention, and it worked. What say you radio vets?
So first of all, can I just say this, Mike? That was your best Mark Weisblot ever. that was a Mark Weisblot moment.
Oh wow! Okay.
So Christian Hall is the brand director there, who is from Calgary, where he worked. I think actually maybe he was at Edmonton. He might have worked at Sonic at Edmonton, and he brought the format here basically. And so the people you're referring to, first of all, are two wonderfully talented human beings named Kevin and Sonia, who were the morning show at Kiss FM. And Christian had so much respect for them, and rightfully so, that he actually allowed them to say goodbye, which, Scott, as you know, never happens in our business, or very rarely. So he allowed them to say goodbye a couple of days ago, which I listened to, and which they did. And then they went for the Rage Against the Machine angle. And, you know, being in the industry, I knew it was all a ploy, but I was walking through White Rock yesterday, and a friend of mine I ran into said, "Hey, do you hear about the engineers taking over the radio station?" I'm like, see, so it obviously worked. What Christian wanted to do worked. The problem that a lot of people have, especially those of us who are very close to the radio industry, is the fact that, like most major companies that own radio stations these days, they'll go in, but they're not going all the way in. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to play Rage Against the Machine 24/7, you better include the most important part of the song, which is what says, "Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me," and then "motherfucker." And they didn't. They played the edited version, which has been okayed by the band and the label. So did it kind of come across kind of lame to me? Yeah, because they didn't have the balls to play. No,
because they need the CRTC to make some rulings in their favor. They're not going to fuck with that. They're not stupid.
Of course.
I'm with Neil, and I think they could have taken it to another level. And you said it worked, and maybe, you know, the whole thing of the engineers is a cute little angle, and maybe they just sent out media releases and connected with the right people to tell the right story. But they could have taken it to another level to play that version of the song, which could have got them in trouble, which would have like tripled the attention. They could, and you can always play the, you know what, a cease and desist. You know, we were told, the authorities told us to take this off the air, so we did because we were told to. But look at us rebels. You know, that is alternative.
But we all know how risk averse Rogers is, so that's never going to happen. That's what I'm saying.
Mike, no. I mean, but the thing is, too, we have, like I mentioned, we have 3 alt rock stations in Vancouver now. One of them is going to change formats. Everybody pretty much is assured, and that's a station called The Peak. And I feel bad because it's a station that many of my friends work at right now, and unfortunately, when there's format changes, there's employee changes, and the on-air staff gets blown out 99% of the time. So that's unfortunate. And then CFox, where I was working for 10 years, has been a powerhouse of that format in this market. Still to this day it's number 1 or number 2 consistently in this market with the key demos. And you know, and they've got a powerhouse morning show there. And you take Kevin and Sonia out, who are well established here, and you put in a virtual unknown. It's a female, which I think is a great deal for radio. The fact that it's a female fronted morning show, which is another rare thing for this, you know, to say this in 2022.
Yeah, in this day and age, it still is.
We got Josie Dye doing Indy 88 mornings.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Good for Jose. Yeah, and good honor. And I know she seems to be holding her own. I don't know the Toronto market anymore, but I can tell you that the person that's on there that I heard this morning wasn't great. I'm not going to lie to you. Coming in after Kevin and Sonia, going to be tough shoes to fill. I know you guys don't know.
This is on the new. So they've stopped. This is
on
playing.
Sonic.
Yeah.
Fuck you.
Yeah. They started today.
They stopped okay. This morning. They stopped, and they're just playing the same old alt rock.
I'd be curious what the first song they played after that. But just know. Like, and now Lumineers, hey ho, like awesome. back to this.
I'm not sure.
Hang on, I'm a Lumineers fan, but yeah,
they're okay.
I think it was Elvis Presley's a little less conversation. I think.
I did see one article that kind of called them on, say, hey, this is a publicity stunt, and the Tyee, which I think makes sense, but being sort of what their sort of political leanings and what not are. But I totally agree. Like the Guardian, Pitchfork, Rolling Stone.
But no critical thinking, right, Cam? What happened? Like, what happened?
Well, I feel like they didn't say if this was a stunt or not, but that's almost besides the point. I'm like, I just don't think it's that interesting. Although I must say, as a PR person, I'm very offended by your visceral reaction to PR stunts. But I'll let that slide.
I'm allergic to bullshit, Cam. You know that.
At the end of the day,
I got some great Twitter data if you want to.
At the end of the day, though, guys, I mean, they did what they felt they had to do to get the word out. And, not a lot of people talking about terrestrial radio these days.
I'll be the first to say it worked. Like, it worked.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It absolutely worked. I just think it's ridiculous how people have stopped thinking critically in 2022. It's like it's like what is the movie? What's the movie where he's like sell the
meatballs? just a random movie.
My Stepmother's an Alien.
Or they basically when the story is what the community needs, the story. It'll come later. I'll Google the name of the fucking movie and I'll get back to you. And it's like
right here.
Okay, look, let's
Apocalypse Now. Come on, Mike.
Well, Cam, we know you haven't seen any movies.
It's time for the Great Lakes promo and
the man. I just remember the name, and I haven't Googled it yet. You guys, the man who shot Liberty Valance. Has anyone seen the man who shot Liberty Valance?
No.
Yeah.
So
I have not.
Watch the movie and get back to me.
Okay.
Which one of you gentlemen
should have played that?
Wants to start us? It is a great song, actually.
Is it Glenn Campbell?
Liberty Valance. It's great. Is it Glenn Campbell?
No.
I don't think so.
Probably.
Who, maybe Scott, you're the subject matter expert here. Do you want to start us off here so we can go on our little journey here? I'm looking forward to this.
Okay, just to wrap up the last thing, which would be a great conversation for another day about, what is alternative? Because I think there's two ways of defining what is alternative music. And part of that was, and I go back to those 80s CFNY days, that part of the definition of alternative originally was that it was not it was the music that mainstream was not playing, that mainstream radio was not playing this music. So it did not define a style of music. It was just like they weren't playing this, so we'll play it. And that's part of where it started. Then years in, people started to come up with their own definition, because stations like CFNY in the 80s were playing, Depeche Mode, New Order, Smiths, Cure, etc. And then all of a sudden, so it's got to sound a little bit like this. And so that's where it became funny, because, somebody like Paul Simon came out with Graceland, and mainstream radio were like, what the hell is this?
Yeah,
we're not playing this. So, we had a big meeting about it and going, this is fucking cool. This is a great record. And so we played Graceland, Paul Simon, many months before mainstream radio decided, they thought, well, we got to play this. And that was alternative, and there's many examples of that. So it's really hard to define, what is alternative? Certainly, what is alternative today? So I'll leave that for another discussion another day, though. It's a good conversation.
Oh, it's a great combo.
Good argument, right?
At some point, the alternative becomes mainstream. Like, I'm thinking of Smells Like Teen Spirit, right? Like, at some point, that's not the alternative.
Right. And that's the funny thing. A song starts a certain way, and it might be, Sweet Dreams by Eurythmics. And when that first came out, it's like, this is weird, it's different, this is very alternative. And then fast forward when like everybody in the world knows the song, and it's like, well, this is commercial crossover bullshit.
Mainstream.
Well, honestly, like
But the song never changed. It's the same song. You know?
Exactly.
I'd argue Tom Morello retweeting this Rogers publicity stunt this morning is an example of that, because like Rage, when they came out, they were like, oh my, this band's crazy, there's nothing like these guys. And now, I mean, they're just like a censored version of the song is being used for like a format swap in Canada.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody told the guys in the band that, oh, by the way, they're playing the edited version of the song, which is, which people go, well, what's the big deal? But it's this, the edit is such a significant,
it's a huge deal.
Song.
It is. Yeah. Fuck you. I won't do what you tell me. Like, that's the heart of this song. You can't just rip out its heart.
It's the build up and the money shot.
This actually a segue back into the club.
Yeah, good.
Club
We need to get back there, Cam.
But
but
it's Club 102 would play like the unedited version after like 9 p.m.
Yes,
like they would play that.
100%.
I want to.
And closer,
beep you like an animal.
I want to fuck you like an animal. Like absolutely.
They would do it deliberately. Stuart Myers told them play the unedited version of it. That's Stuart Myers was like, I've talked a lot about Stuart Myers. Hopefully one day we'll get him on. Just knew all the right buttons to push and when to push them.
And his daughter's on that new station.
Buttons.
She is.
Oh,
Carly.
That's cool. I didn't know that. That's good for her.
Carly is the co-host of the afternoon show with Jay Brody.
Right,
FOTM,
with
Jay Brody.
FOTM Jay Brody. They got to know each other at CFNY.
Follow the money.
And I heard them today, and you know what? I'm going to be honest. They were the best I heard all day. And I'm not just saying that because I know who Carly is.
Well, that's your future morning show then.
There you go.
I would say.
Look at us.
Let's go deep and
yeah, if Gurdeep, you keep Pooja and Gurdeep. Come on, Cam, get it right.
Mike's more obsessed of a show he will never listen to, but
I think it's more Wise Blood. I think it's more Wise Blood.
Oh my God, it's you. It's all you, bro.
Let's talk about dance music. Are we ready to rock? I guess we're not. We're dancing. We're not really rocking, but go ahead.
Yeah, so this is the radio guy in me. I feel like this is a perfect time for some mentions of some sponsors. And then we can go right into the topic.
Who's producing this show, Scott?
I know. I can't help it.
Executive producer, Scot Turner.
I've been a program director for too long. I can't help it.
Okay, so we talked a lot about Vancouver here on Toronto Mike. Did you know the headquarters, the first retail store for Doer is in Vancouver? Did you know that, Brother Bill?
Oh. I did.
You knew that?
I did know that. I've never seen it, but I think I heard it on another podcast featuring some friends of yours, Mike.
I got to find out which one that is. Okay, so
Blundell.
No. That's another show.
He said friends. Friends, he said. Okay.
H&F, Mike.
Oh. By the way, shout out to Liz Braun. I love that line because I was thinking Doers the Scotch too, and you mentioned that, which is a great podcast.
Wasn't Liz Braun great?
Oh my God, that was brilliant.
Yeah.
Just a quick side story. Have you listened to it, Neil? Did Cam listen to it yet? I loved. There was the part. It was just kind of a side story, but she's like, oh, and I had to take Peter Gabriel to go see the Ramones at the New Yorker. Like, Jesus. And the Ramones, their first two shows in Toronto were 76 and 77 at the New Yorker. And I'm thinking,
the Garys.
And she didn't even know who Peter Gabriel was. She's like, oh, I had to take this guy, or Peter Gabriel, and I take him to the New Yorker. And the New Yorker had these posters of Genesis up on the wall, and I didn't even know that was him. I'm like, holy shit.
Funny, eh?
It was beautiful.
Yeah. Between that and that's the shade thrown at Joni Mitchell.
Yeah, what was up with that?
That was weird.
I love that.
Blindsided.
That was real talk.
Who saw that coming, right? Like, it's
that was real talk. That was great.
I love that.
I think
Scott, Sorry, I was going to say, Scott, you mentioned Peter Gabriel to the Ramones. It's like an Ivor Hamilton story where he had the guys from Yellow come to the studio and he took them to the S&S, which was a strip joint in Brampton.
Yes, I remember that now.
Like,
so
what
on this note,
these days,
do you know who my guest? Maybe you guys know this gentleman, but my guest on Saturday actually is going to be a guy who calls himself Promo Man. Okay?
Oh yeah.
So, I know. Is it just how's that? Is that the Duff Man? Is that Duff Man you're doing, or is that this Duff Man?
Isn't that yellow?
That's
That's yellow. Yeah. Oh yeah. But I thought you were doing Duff Man because I said Promo Man. No.
Promo Man.
Anyway, this guy's
Man?
got stories about everybody from Liberace to Keith Moon to the role. So he was there when Keith Richards got arrested. Like, this guy's got the stories. Freddie Mercury stories. Anyways, he's got Johnny.
He's like a publicist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's a promo guy for musicians.
And who is it?
Well, his name is Nick. And I'm going to butcher his last name. Nick P. we'll call him, and he goes by Promo Man, and he's going to come tell stories. But anyway, we're off topic here.
Oh,
Save 15%. Oh yeah, I forgot. This show has been produced by Scot Turner. So, save 15% at the Toronto retail. I don't know if it'll work in Vancouver. Check it out for me, brother. But it definitely works on Queen Street in Toronto and at doer.ca, DUER.ca. Save 15% with the promo code Toronto Mike. Do it. Get your cannabis and cannabis accessories at Canna Cabana all across the country. They've got over 100 locations. Great people. That's where we get our weed from if you're a good FOTM. So thank you, Canna Cabana. StickerU.com, available across the country at StickerU.com. Get your tattoos, your temporary tattoos, your stickers, your decals. Palma Pasta. Brother, when am I going to meet you so I can give you a lasagna?
You owe me a few. I don't know when I'm going to be in Toronto next.
I can't tell whether we should talk about. There's a whole thing. I feel like there's an elephant sitting there, but I thought maybe we'd keep it off this episode, but maybe we'll talk about it afterwards.
Why I won't come to Toronto?
Oh,
is that what you're asking? No. I you know what? I hope to be there one day, and you were first on my list, Mike. Airport Mike's.
Okay, good.
For my food.
And you're going to get your lasagna from Palma Pasta. We're going to have TMLXX on September 1st, if you can come for that. Scott, you've got to make the trip to Southern Etobicoke for TMLXX on September 1st. September 1, 6 to 9 p.m. It's at Great Lakes Brewery.
Okay.
So shout out to Great Lakes.
I know this is audio, but Scott, I have to ask you, because we're on a Zoom call here.
Yes.
Are you at a certain wing of your cottage somewhere? What is? It's all wood. I'm seeing wood.
So for those that are listening on the podcast, I
took a screen cap. They could look at the picture that I took.
Yeah, there you go.
Broadcasting from the Turner Ranch that has been affectionately called over the years. I've had various parties here, raves, and all kinds of events. So I'm on 2 acres in North Burlington, beautiful spot. 26 years, and I just sold it.
Wow.
Oh, no way.
Brother, just sold it. Sad story. Another story for another day.
But did you have to sell it?
It's a tongue and groove pine cottage in Burlington. It's like if you were here, you feel like you're up in cottage country, but it's beautiful.
That's what it looks like. Yeah,
that's
what it looks like.
I could bike to you. Did you have to sell it, or is this something you wanted to do?
It was part of the plans of the family plans for the future, and it'll be sad to leave here, but we're leaving for the right reasons and for the future. Yes.
Are you moving back to your wife's hometown of Bramalea, Ontario?
No. We're actually, very quickly moving to Paris, Ontario. This little nook that is a really sweet little place, and that's the plans right now. So there's got some family reasons behind it all, with aging parents that need some help, that sort of thing, which happens to people of our age, right? So that's part of it. And then, future retirement. But, retirement means me to do more of what I want to do, stuff like this, just spend more of my time cycling. And
get a better microphone. Better microphone, you could do more
things.
And
a better microphone. I changed microphones, and this one still sucks, right?
No, this is better.
Okay.
I think it's better. It's better.
You know what? It's funny you mentioned that, Scott, about your family with people getting older. This is the reason why I haven't been to Toronto. For those who don't know, I have a 94-year-old mother who I have to see every day and I take care of. So
there you go.
That makes it pretty impossible for me to spend any time outside of British Columbia. So I have not been anywhere. And I hate to word it this way, but I will. When she goes, it's going to free up a lot of my time, and you will see me a lot more in Toronto.
Well, brother,
that's
now
the reason why.
You fucked up my next line. Now I can't say shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. So thanks a lot.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
There you
Scott.
go.
Let's
But
dive in, buddy.
It's a part of life, and I got a text just this afternoon from a good friend whose mother just passed away, and it's anybody in and around maybe not your age, Mike and Cam. I don't know your age because you look kind of young, like Toronto Mike.
Yeah,
Neil's
like
kind of old, like me.
No.
Getting there.
Cam, are you 40 yet?
Oh, come on. No, I'm 44. You know that, Mike.
Ah, okay.
And our friend Stu is 39.
It's still young, but brother, you look amazing. You don't age.
Thanks,
and
man.
You know what? I'm the old guy in the group, but what happens is, in your 50s and certainly your 60s, there's just aging parents. Those that are still alive, it's just a fact of life. They either need help, or at that point where they're passing away. Just a part of life.
Absolutely.
Yep.
It is.
Well, you're good sons. Now, Scott, producer Scott, I've done the mentions. Are you ready to rock and roll here?
Absolutely. Yes. So you want me to lead this?
Yes, please.
Well, yeah, I thought, we first talked about the raves, and I think it needs, honestly, to do it right, it needs a 2-3 part, podcast episode and bring in some people that were there.
Sounds like a lot of work, Scott.
To tell some of the stories. Yeah, maybe it is, but there's so many stories involved with it. Like any story, any history of any particular entity, you can break it into certain stories and parts and pieces. And I thought, we could talk about where we could kind of center this a little bit and Cam, thanks for bringing this up, is maybe 80s, 90s, clubs in Toronto, dance music in particular, which you could frame under electronic music. The interesting thing when I tell people and I talk about dance music, in the 80s, particularly 90s, the term that we used at the time was dance music, which included everything that you played in a club. And that could be hip hop, that could be house music, that could be alternative music. It's all those different things. But, we had certainly powered by, I would say, CFNY and some of the college stations and some of the music at the time. There were a lot of alternative clubs that supported the music and other mainstream clubs in the 80s. But there was also in the 90s an explosion of new clubs, because there was a time, and I'm trying to remember the exact time that, when the Copa came around, was one of the first sort of really upscale nightclubs. And there were only few of them around at the time. But then when the entertainment district opened up into the 90s, that just the explosion of clubs and music, dance music. And then, you could argue that Energy 108 was part of that, to helping the explosion of music. A lot of different things happening at the same time. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Scott, maybe what were the clubs, either if you're working live tear type stuff or producing, or just as a patron, what were the clubs you personally spent the most time at? I'm so curious. And I reference it in our email. I have it right here. It's because you wrote the blurb on Denise Benson's book, which is so, Mike, I should bring this over next time I come. You would love this book, because it's as much about architecture and our changing city as it is about it's also about music and sort of a lot of great war stories. But I'm curious, you blurb there on the back from Scot Turner. Scott, which of these clubs, I'm sure a lot of them are featured in here, were your go-to places, either personally or professionally?
There's so many in the book, and that's a great book, again, to repeat that, Then and Now, Denise Benson's book. And she's got, all series are online too. Anybody can just Google it and you can read the stories, extensive stories of the club scene in particularly 80s and 90s. And she covered everything, from the more mainstream clubs to the most, I'd say, the underground alternative clubs and the gay clubs that were part of the scene in Toronto, and all of that and in between. It's a really great collection of the club life. I would say it's mostly 80s, wouldn't you? Late 70s, 80s, I guess, mostly.
Well, I just love, she talks from everyone from the person doing the coat check to the owners, just some of the patrons, the bartenders, the bands playing there. It's really, I think it started as a column in Weekly, and then she collected it all. Mike, she'd be a great guest too, because she has an awesome resume. Is just a cool person.
Sold.
I've gotten to know her a little bit over the years.
Another sale for Cam Gordon.
And Cam, there's a couple of favorites, not necessarily that I DJ'd at, although I did DJ Domino Club had a couple of resurrections. There was the Domino Club, and then it moved location. There was Twilight Zone, which I also DJ'd at, which is legendary in Toronto because it was, one of those after-hour clubs that did not serve alcohol. And there was a few of those. The Twilight Zone is one of them. They were known for a great sound system and a very open music policy. And I think as a younger kid at the time, just late teens, early 20s, I think Twilight Zone or one of the other ones I went to, maybe it was Voodoo Club, which is another really cool club. One of the first, you went there for the music, and you so went there for the music because there was no booze. Like, these were after-hour clubs for the most part, and nobody was in there at midnight. It was empty. It was tumbleweed going through the club, and then when the bars closed, then people start coming in, and then 4 a.m. is when it was on. It was very cool to be there. But one of the funny why this sticks in my head is the first time I saw a co-bathroom. I just remember, I gotta go to the can, and it was like, ooh, what's going on?
Yeah, unisex.
What's going on? Unisex. It was like, okay. And there's that one moment, like for like 10 seconds, I'm just going, what's this? And then you realize everybody's normal and everything's cool, and you go, okay, and off you go. And that was the scene, and nobody was in. It wasn't necessarily about picking people up. It wasn't necessarily about the drugs, although I'm sure there were drugs involved. But there were a lot of people that went there to dance, and they were into the club music, and that was that. And admittedly, fashion was the culture of fashion and how people looking cool and being able to be themselves, and that the gay culture is part of that too. Is that people had a chance to go and feel normal in a world where they wouldn't normally be normal, and that speaks for CFNY and alternative music too, because a lot of the people that connected through that station of music just felt like they were weirdos, and people called them weirdos, and there were those spaces in Toronto clubs helped you be normal, and that was an important thing, I think, for a lot of people in those years growing up. Right
before we get to the music, I want to see, maybe Brother Bill, you'll have some insight into this, but I wasn't a part of this rave scene, but I understand ecstasy was a huge part of it, right? Like, wasn't the drugs kind of a key ingredient here?
Right to the drug question. I love it.
Yeah, going right to me too. That's fantastic. So let me just start by saying this before I line up my comments.
Yeah.
So I must have ignored your email threads talking about shelving Toronto rave. That's all the homework I've done. It's based on the rave scene.
Well, it came late. It was a late breaking decision by Scott. I'm not sure, because Scott's the producer. I didn't feel I could push back.
Yeah, I can hold my own, but I will tell you that obviously CFNY had that one sound in the 80s, and in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yep.
We kind of branched off in two directions. So you had the guys like Scott, who were more on the dance side of things, along with Hedley Jones and to an extent Chris Shepard, and Don Burns as well. And then you had the people like myself and Martin Streak and people like that, Pete Fowler, who were sort of the next wave, and Nirvana kind of defined us. So I didn't like dance music that much. I didn't mind the new wave stuff of the 80s. That's what got me listening to CFNY, because as Scott mentioned earlier, it was playing non-mainstream music. That was what attracted me originally to it. Yet when this was all happening, when the rave thing was starting to break in the early 90s, I was first put on the air. And I remember I used to play a lot of that, like the techno side of things, just to kind of get myself immersed, because I knew there was something coming with the rave scene. And I ended up going to a rave. I didn't go to lots of them. I wasn't entrenched the way Scott was. But I went to a rave in 1992 on May 31st, because I looked it up. It was called Nitrous 13. Do you remember that, Scott?
Yes.
So
was that the mud rave? Sorry, what was the date? May.
It was May 31st, I think, 1992. It was at a warehouse somewhere.
Yes. That was one of the early ones. Yeah. Was that the one with 2 Unlimited or the
Yes.
one? Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Wow.
And so that was my first taste of rave music. And frankly, I didn't like it. I didn't find I found it all this like hyperactive beats, and that's, I don't know.
Yeah, but were you doing the drugs there, brother?
Well, there's where I'm going next.
Okay.
So, there was a lot of drugs in those days, and I was for certain partaking in those
let's
drugs.
be more specific, though.
It's
We were
ecstasy,
doing
Drugs
right?
and there's drugs.
It's
We were
ecstasy,
doing
right?
ecstasy.
Yeah.
So,
Like party drugs.
you'd go
Yeah.
to,
Yeah, the
you'd
rave
do a
drugs.
tab of ecstasy, like a pill or whatever, and then you just drink water all night because you were so goddamn thirsty all the time. And it just gave you this super shot of energy. It almost was like a euphoric caffeine buzz,
Yeah.
And so it was there. I mean, it was definitely there. Scott knows that too. And it was part of any movement, any musical youth movement is going to have drugs. It's going to be there.
So what year are we talking, like, Bill? When would that experience, Bill/Neil?
So 92, Cameron?
I'll never get it right.
There's no Neil on this Zoom, okay?
It's all good. It's all good. 1992 was when I went to that rave, and it's the only one I remember going to. Although I remember, I think, Scott, seeing you at a Moby rave somewhere downtown that Shepard took me to once. I think we ran into you along the way. And then obviously I knew what was going on with Shepard, who was DJ Dog Whistle. And I knew what was going on specifically with one of the greatest human beings that ever lived. And that's Don Burns, who was Dr. Trance, who was this older guy that was into this music. So like, that was Don though, right, Scott? He was just a guy that he was so passionate about music that when he fell in love with something, he was going to tell everybody about it. And that's, and that's what I remember about that scene. I remember rave music had this grip on people and in a positive way. And unfortunately, like I mentioned, the drugs come with it too. That's just a fact of it. But I would say that comparatively speaking, from a guy who came from punk rock and into the 90s and the alternative stuff, I don't think there was any more drugs than anywhere else.
And it wasn't the dirty stuff. Like, it sounds like it was primarily ecstasy.
Yes.
Sure, that's all I knew. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because okay, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I was going to say I went back just talking about some of those clubs in the 80s, and especially after hours when, there was no alcohol being served. So you knew that there was a certain percentage of people that were there just for the music. They were maybe to socialize. There are other factors, fashion and those things too, and certainly drugs. And it would be really hard to say, and I would be naive to think that at Twilight Zone there weren't a certain percentage on drugs. But and it's same thing with the raves, and particularly the early rave scene, is that what, I went to a lot of raves. I would hesitate to guesstimate, but I would say maybe 50% were on ecstasy. And that may be high.
50 or
50%, 50. But that's just a guesstimate. I don't know. I don't know what the numbers were. I clearly knew who you could tell just by looking, talking, and the group that you surrounded yourself with. But it's really hard to tell. But it's a factor, as Neil said, in any scene, any music scene, and even the punk scene. When I read deeper stories of the punk scene, I'm really surprised to see, because I thought punk was maybe a bunch of beers and music, but it was like, oh shit, there's
heroin,
there's coke, and there's heroin, and heroin is like, shit, that's so it infiltrates every sort of scene. So the drugs are a part of a scene for sure, and it's cool, brother, that was one of the earliest raves.
Wow.
Because really the first raves, and that could be argued. That's why we need a bigger panel, because they'll all argue who was first. But that was one of the first ones. That 1992, 30 years ago, was sort of ground zero for the beginning of the scene in Toronto.
I read somewhere, and I'm glad at least a couple of you were there. Cam, I don't know when you started attending your first raves. I know you were awfully young in 1990.
It's like in high school still. So.
Okay, so
although I guess people go in high school. I know.
Because I read Toronto was considered to be like the rave capital of North America. Is that true?
It's a good argument. If you compare the other at the scene of that 30 years ago, 92, there was not much happening elsewhere. There were just some pockets of it in New York, and a bunch of us in Neil would remember this, is that and there's a connection. And Neil pointed that out, is there was, when you go back, especially the late 80s, there was, and particularly some of us that, from Shepherd and, just about everybody at the station at the time, it really played a really vast selection of what was alternative. And it went from, the electronic industrial sounds to, the REMs and the Smiths and the more guitar based stuff, and everything in between. And that's kind of the divide there that Neil talks about, that, the late 80s, early 90s were the station, started, and that's where I was fighting for the continuation.
Can you be specific? Like, shout out some of these bands that would be on the dance side of the alternative movement here.
Yeah, well, from Depeche Mode and New Order, you look at those sort of, and you go back, you can go further back to Kraftwerk that sort of drove all that. But there were other bands, like Cabaret Voltaire. Pet Shop Boys, Cabaret Voltaire, and the industrial harder sound that was out there, Nitzer Ebb, and bands like that. It was always part of the music and of CFNY. So there was the alternative, harder industrial and techno music, and that sort of brought us into the late 80s, early 90s, where techno just really took off from Detroit, from Belgium, from Germany, from the UK, from Leeds and the Warp label and that shit. And that was like a whole new burgeoning scene that people like myself and Shep and that were really getting into. And I thought that needs to be part of the future of CFNY,
right?
Where there was a divide, where it was like, no, Nirvana, grunge, that's the future. And nobody was wrong. They were all right. And it went in a certain direction. And that's kind of where I went, I'm out. I need to support this side of the music, and that's kind of where I went. And the station did not necessarily go in the wrong direction, which just wasn't the right direction for some people, right?
Yeah.
And you could argue this, we could argue that for days, but that was kind of a turning point. The Nirvana was kind of the ground zero for the new direction, right?
The new direction. So up until then, I got put on the air. I mean, Scott was there a lot longer than before I was there. Not aging you too much, Scott, but I got put on the air in the winter of 1990. So that was Nirvana's Nevermind didn't come out until 1991, September of 91. So, for me, the dance music, more towards the dance side of things, bands that I like were like a band called Beloved. There was Depeche Mode, obviously. Loved Depeche Mode. They were the godfathers sort of the new wave, kind of heading in that direction. Erasure. I remember being a big fan of Erasure.
Yep.
Electronic. Was it electronic? Yazoo. Absolutely. Like all this, that kind of sound.
Yeah.
And had Nirvana not happened, who knows what would have happened with CFNY? I don't know. I presume it probably would have gone in the direction that, Scott, you're talking about, and the electronic side of things. And maybe if that happened, Energy 108 wouldn't have happened.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
This is a weird question. Then I'm actually going to want to parlay this into our favorite game, CFNY Not, because I do have a list of bands. I'm curious if CFNY played them. Every band you just mentioned, I'm just curious, because the only band I can sort of think of that might fit the bill is that band Information Society, and I'm not even sure that's like a dance. Like, nothing is like American. There's no like American bands really in this mix. Like Moby came along and was semi-mainstream, I guess, from the start, but not even really when he was doing like Go and stuff. It's just like, well, some people know, it's like Twin Peaks song and stuff, but like that was pretty still subterranean. Like late 80s, early 90s, there's no like US based artists really in the mix here, unless I'm wrong. I guess like Nine Inch Nails and shit would like filter.
Well, that in more the industrial side of things. A lot of the industrial bands were European, like Front 242 and Night Sarab and Sarab, whichever you want to go with. Things like that.
But interestingly, on that note, Cam, is that sort of the pioneers were, a lot of American underground DJ producers. Joey Beltram, the Plus 8 label, which is actually out of London, but they kind of, everybody thought they were out of Detroit. And so there was these underground producers, DJs that were a lot of Europeans and British people were picking up on those sounds, going, wow, this is cool shit, let's take it to another level, which they did. And there's a lot of stories about British producers, artists, picking up on American sounds from, whether it's the Deep South and rock and roll and blues and that, and turning it into a whole new thing. That kind of happened with electronic music. So a lot of electronic people always point to Detroit. And it was these house music people that were, fiddling around with new technology coming out and giving it more of that kind of techno-y sound. And that's kind of where a lot of it, some of that, not all of it, but some of the inspirations came from.
Yeah.
So, you could point back to America as being the influence for some of these artists. But yeah, good point. I'm thinking beyond Moby.
I was going to say that's
right.
Parlays into one of my and I think I'll just filter these in as they come up. But yeah, so you got the Detroit guys, you got Derek May, you got Kevin Saunderson, Juan Atkins, and then hop over to Chicago, you have more like house and jungle, I think, but like Frankie Knuckles. Did CFNY play any of this stuff?
So they probably did.
Yeah, and you know what? And here's a way to best understand that, and I see this so many times on social posts and that, when people, I'll post something or somebody posts something going, that's not CFNY, that's not alternative, they didn't play that. And then a few of us will step in going, well, yeah, kind of, sort of. But here's where, as Neil just pointed out, what happened was, you remember, we have so many live to airs and so many club events and shows, specialty shows like Headley, that did play that stuff. And you have to think about this in terms of listener audience. So CFNY tended to have a higher audience as you went through the day. Pete, going far back as Pete and Gates, their numbers were okay, but not through the roof. Middays were okay. Afternoons started to go up. Evenings were incredible. Yeah, evenings and overnights, and then weekend numbers, according to the ratings, were just through the roof. And that's kind of where people, would tune in. Those people that weren't mainstream hardcore CFNY listeners would listen at night and weekends. And what would they hear in those times? Shit you didn't normally play during the day. Right? And that's where you hear there were certain songs that were not played till after 6, and then certain tracks, and that's club stuff. A lot of club stuff were only played on weekend shows like Headley, like Shep, but that had such a huge audience. Certain people go, yeah, they played that, and other people going, well, wait a minute, I didn't hear that.
I want to piggyback on this. We mentioned a band. I think that rave that Brother Bill went to in '92, you described it, Scott, as the Too Unlimited rave, I think you called it. So what do you mean by that? Was Too Unlimited there?
Yes.
Hey, okay. Do you have the song queued up? I sent you.
Well, no, I do. The music. The music. No, the music happens in post. But I am setting you up for that story. So.
Okay. Yeah.
I remember listening throughout the '90s to CFNY, and you're kind of making a good point here. Where during the day, you guys would never ever play Too Unlimited during the day. Like I would not hear.
Oh God, no.
No, Get Ready for This was not going to get played on CFNY. But is it possible that during a live to air, Too Unlimited could get in the mix?
Yes.
Yep.
Sock'em techno with Don Cherry.
Right.
He could shoot. Yes. He could score number for Bobby Orr.
Right. Where's Stu Stone when you need him? Okay. So
clear the dance floor
hit. To put that in perspective, the context, that goes back to the Sweet Dreams and what is alternative, is that when Too Unlimited, Get Ready for This came out, it was a instrumental track, done by club producers for the clubs. They put this, thing together, and it was very ravey, that whatever the technology they were using at the time. I can't remember all the different samplers and the names of the 303s and 808s and all these different things they used. But it was like a very, very rave-driven techno track built for the clubs that just took off in the clubs and took off in the raves. But it was, make no mistake, when it came out, a underground, 100% underground track. Wow. That nobody would play on the radio, first of all, because it was instrumental. So it had this brief period that it lived as this really cool club underground track and played at raves. And, they were booked to play that. Shep had brought them in through his arrangement with Quality Records to play. I think they played the week before at RPM or something. And they were booked quickly because they were in town for a week. They were quickly booked for this rave when it was like it wasn't played on radio. It was this underground, club rave track. And it wasn't until like a year later that it crossed over. And then the band, when it started to take off, that's when the label stepped in going, we got a hit record here. You need to you need to rap on it. You got to put some vocals on it. You got to come, they're like, oh, fuck, okay. And, they stuck some vocals on it, and then it just went crazy. And that happened many, many times with many, many underground tracks, right? But that's really it. So certain tracks start, as an underground thing that nobody thought would go anywhere, and then it builds a life of its own. That's a classic example.
Love it.
Because look at it now, right? What is it? It's a hockey stadium anthem.
It's absolutely an arena jam. I'm sure they're still playing it probably. Although I did notice when I went to a game this year, they finally retired Cotton Eye Joe.
Oh, God.
Well, I was
shoot me.
Well, thank God for that.
That reminds me of another track, and this is also on my list. And I don't know if you guys remember this, because this was a big song. The song Swamp Thing, and let me not the Chameleon song by The Grid. Was that a song?
Which is a great song.
I played? Yeah, which I feel like without The Grid's Swamp Thing, there's no Cotton Eye Joe.
So Rednecks, I think, was the artist behind Cotton Eye Joe.
Yes, from Sweden.
Yeah. Well, they all were, because were they Dutch? Where were Two Unlimited from?
Two Unlimited were from Holland.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
The track that Cam, you speak of, Swamp Thing by The Grid, to me, that was just a brilliant track. A really good, catchy instrumental techno track.
Good biking song, too.
Yeah, with a banjo in it. If you haven't heard it, it's hard not to like it. But no,
that's where Mumford and Sons got it.
That would have been I think that was 96. There's no way in the world that Edge would have played that at the time. We played it on Energy. It was a huge track, but it did start at the raves. I remember being at a particular rave at a particular night, where there may or may not have been ecstasy involved, and one of the DJs dropped that. And absolutely, seeing 4,000 or 5,000 people at 4 a.m. on E, when that drops and when it breaks into the banjo and the kick drum kicks in, it's just a moment, right? It's very cool.
Super unique, yeah.
Yeah.
can we talk about? I mentioned this in the email. Talk about CanCon, one of our favorite topics. I'm curious how many I mentioned. So there's kind of the Chicago and the Detroit guys. So that's ticking a box, I suppose, for US. I'm curious, late 80s, early 90s, same deal. Canadian artists filtering into here. I'm just gonna say a few names. Was anybody here in the mix? So we got. I'd be shocked if this guy made it there, but Richie Hawtin, any of the Plastic Man stuff, which is a bit more kind of minimal, but then all these more mainstream bands. We got Concan, we got John James, we got Lisa Lougheed, and then a bit later, these are more Energy 108 bands, but MJ and Capital Sound, who I think were out of Ottawa.
So we can go through them individually, but yes and no on some of those. And brother would remember that I started a show with May Potts. And those late 80s, 89, 90, 91 with CFNY called Beats Per Minute.
Yep.
And it was a feature show
Dance-based.
a feature show on the weekends. And part of why I did that is because the dance music was just really starting to grow, and I just wanted to, obviously my interest in that stuff was growing, and I thought, man, here's a chance to expose some of that stuff wasn't playing in normal rotation on the station. So there was a few things that you mentioned there that we would play on that show. But again, weekends, features only. And go ahead, brother.
So I was just going to throw this in. It's a bit of a sidetracker, so I'll hopefully bring it back. But, this is the difference between the era now of broadcasters and the era, when I'm listening to Scott talk about this, and the era of broadcasters that we were. We were more like DJs than we were like announcers, because as you can hear in Scott's voice, and it was the same with me as well, the number one thing we wanted to do was introduce people to new music and wanted to get music that we loved out there so
100%.
People could hear it. Yeah. So we'd be like, so Scott created a show with May Potts called Beats Per Minute. The reason why is because Scott loved that dance shit. Pardon me for using that word. And really wanted people to hear it.
Yeah.
Listening to, I haven't listened to alt rock radio in a long time. I'm listening to it today. The two things that really stand out for me is how much the people that are on the air now don't understand the importance of telling a little story about a song or a band, something like that. They don't seem to know the music at all. They just come in with these little 30-second or 45-second blurbs about some event that happened somewhere that, frankly, I don't give a shit about. I want to hear where that band's from. I want to hear a story about that band. And that's why I got into radio, because of that. Not because I wanted to come in between songs and just say, hey, it's your buddy, Brother Bill, here to tell you that, someone in Toledo, Ohio drank some poison or something like this.
You know who's the last guy who seemed to do this was Bookie. Agreed. And you know what?
Yeah.
I always missed. That's what I always craved. Okay. I still listen to Ongoing History New Music as a podcast because I get this music in there, but I get to fun facts and mind blows, and I get to hear the story behind the song, who influenced it, what, this, that, the other. I want to be educated by people who are passionate about the music and knowledgeable about the music. And let's face it, right, Cam? That's why PPMM exists.
And
Totally.
I was just going to say that radio, thanks to their ignorance and stupidity, opened a huge floodgate for podcasting, right? Where people want to hear the story. They want to hear the extra dialogue that radio said, shut up.
Right.
Yeah.
No, 100%. And you go look at the analytics
Exactly.
for Toast episodes of Toronto Mike. They're fucking through the roof.
Is that true?
Would I lie to you?
You know who's good? I don't know why this guy came to mind, but some guy who's keeping it real, and most of the stuff he's into is not really my thing. But Errol Nazareth, is on CBC.
Chuck D shouted him out when Chuck D was on Toronto Mike.
Yeah, I feel like he's one of the few guys remaining who's still it's about the fucking music, and that's it.
It's Cam. It's funny because I was an anti-CBC guy for years and years because I always felt, I knew a couple of people who worked there, and they had 6 producers for every show. Meanwhile, I had to do everything myself. So I was a little jealous, I think, more than anything else. But at the end of the day, in 2022, when I go to turn on the radio for information about stuff, it's guys like Errol Nazareth that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
The people that tell stories that have something to say. And unfortunately, alt rock radio, and shoot me down if I never get another job in radio again. But frankly, alt rock radio does not tell any stories. It's just repeating what you already saw on your social media feed. It's
Let
terrible.
me just shout out, Errol Nazareth does a great job. Absolutely, Cam. But, when I invite over, and it's not about me here, this is about Michael Barclay, but if I invite over Michael Barclay and we're going to talk about these 10 Toronto jams or whatever, I listen closely, I absorb, I'm educated, I'm better off for it, and I start parroting these facts to everybody I meet. It's like I'm a jukebox or whatever. It's like, and then you hear that song, and then it's like, I go into that piece of information that Barclay gave me when he was in my backyard. I love having, Ben Rayner was tweeting at me this morning. Yeah.
Great for this.
He'd
be good for a rave episode because he was a raver.
Scott, can we put Ben Rayner on the rave episode?
Absolutely, and he was, certainly mainstream media. He supported it, wrote about it, and was there.
We're gonna do the Avengers of rave. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, and bring Brother into it too because
Brother and Cam come with the fucking title. They can't.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, because I think that's important. You guys are there, but I just wanted to make sure there were some really key people in the scene that they've got great stories to tell too. Can I just quickly to go back on one of the points Cam made, talking about CanCon?
Yeah,
and I think it
not CanCon, ConCan, not CanCon. Oh no, just
I want to talk about ConCan a bit more.
Yeah, two things is ConCan that actually CFNY was the station, the mainstream station, if you will, mainstream alternative station. And I say mainstream because there were always college radio, and I talk so much about different music scenes and scenes of how radio did so much, but I always sometimes.
CKLN you mean, and
I forget
CIUT.
to mention it. But the thing is that when I speak about it, I mean it's really truly, although there were great shows on college radio, and they did have a very passionate listener base, the numbers compared to a CFNY audience, and that is you just can't compare the reach and the power of a CFNY versus a show on CKLN. Not to diminish the power of those shows too, but. So just to go back to ConCan, I beg your pardon.
That's why they hate us, by the way, Scott. That's why they always hated us. College radio always hated CFNY, hated us.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah, and that's a whole other chapter. But on ConCan, I beg your pardon. When we started playing that on CFNY, that exploded. It absolutely exploded.
It's like a worldwide smash.
Absolutely.
There once was a time and there once was a way. We had something going, and to my dismay, attention to me seemed to drift, though I don't know where. And when we're alone, seems there's nothing to say. I bring up the topic, you push it away. You say that you do, but I think it's just you don't care. Why do I feel you're using me? Can change, don't be afraid what you think's in store. I know what's on your mind, you've got lots to lose. Your shallow acquaintance is what's there to choose. You won't get too deep even though I'm worth so much more. So think about it carefully.
Do you want to hustle? That's right. Do you want to salsa? That's right. Do you want to hustle? That's right. Do you want to salsa?
If that's how you want
that's how it'll be. There's no use in trying or making you see that love don't come easy, you don't know what it's about. To get things together won't take anything. Need to see it from you never again. From this day on, lesson, but no more needs count me out. And you know what I'm talking about.
Smile for a while and let's be jolly. Love shouldn't be so melancholy. Come along and share the good times while we can.
I kind of forgotten because I was watching the video on YouTube that has like 6 million views, and I actually did a poll with FOTMs. Was James B in the video, which wasn't him. It was a guy who looked like him.
James B.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever encounter that band? Because I feel
Very
like,
famous.
Yeah, I always said they were Canada's attempt to have their own Pet Shop Boys, like the image of the band, because it was the two guys, the one monotone guy and the other guy like doing the keyboard.
Yeah. And Barry
stuff, high
Hart.
concept.
Barry Harris would be a great guest. Toronto
Yeah.
Mike. He's got a great club history in Toronto, and he was also Thunderpuss, a producer that did huge remixes for like Whitney Houston. He did I forget the song, but he did a Whitney Houston remix, the Thunderpuss remix, which became the hit. It was massive.
He was Canada's
massive.
Shep Pettibone.
Yeah, and he's still doing remix. He's still doing big remixes for big artists. Huge Barry Harris, and he will tell you the Concan story. Great story.
I know everybody
I bet you
now.
Barry's not living in Paris, Ontario.
Well, you don't know that. You don't know that. Maybe.
The other story that came on Canadian content is that there were certain artists that you would have to say, not only CFNY but other stations would play that they wouldn't necessarily normally play because you needed CanCon. And if you go, to the 80s, there are X number of artists available that are, supported certainly by major labels, and there's some, obviously indie label stuff. But there's a limited selection of quality material. It has gotten better through the years. Certainly, hip hop would be a great example. Hip hop and R&B in Canada, like quality hip hop and R&B in the 80s, in 90s was but boy, after the year 2000, what a difference. So so I think there were tracks.
But can you name them?
What were the songs you mentioned again?
We got MJ.
That was Energy.
I like the specific details when you're trashing
Capital
CanCon.
Sound.
That was Energy. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say it because I know these artists too, because I was working at Canada's Wonderland in this era, like in the mid '90s, and they would always have the Energy 108 one who would always be on the radio. Because ever I worked with, it was either like Italian folks or like Brazilian folks, and they all loved like all that music. So like 108 was always on. But you must have encountered like some of these artists. Like you must have met like MJ at like the Canada's Wonderland, Kingswood. Yes. What was their background? Because it's just such a different type of music versus like indie rock, where we're playing Lee's Palace. Like, were these people that were these like theater kids? Like, was there a profile of like people who get into this music? I'm curious because I don't know. I know it's a weird question, but I'm just curious.
Not really. I think one of the things that happened, certainly happened with Energy 108, that and Energy 108 started, we're coming up on 30 years. It was September 1992 when we launched Energy 108. And one of the challenges at the time, and I talk a little bit about this in one of my previous episodes, about the rules of the CRTC rules at the time, which was the non-hit. They were protecting AM radio. AM radio could play any hit, doesn't matter what, and they saw the demise of AM radio. So CRTC put this rule into FM stations saying you can only play so many percentage of hits. Right. So that forced FM radio to, play some album tracks or not the big hits. So we kind of protect AM to play all the hits. Long story short, from CFNY, I came from CFNY to Energy 108. And one of the things I learned from CFNY is that we played a lot of imports. We played a lot of imports that were, you could say, well, this is kind of a top 40 hit. That might be Howard Jones. It might be Yazoo. It could be Depeche Mode. Some of these stuff was like, they were pretty poppy, well-structured pop songs that we would play on CFNY. And people will call them, wow, this is a cool CFNY alternative track, where it's actually, a top 10 hit in the UK.
A dance song, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, or whatever, right? So
And you're just ahead of the curve, because probably in
Yes.
3 months' time, then it was going to be on 104.5 and everywhere else or whatever.
Exactly. So that was sort of what we did, and I'm getting to your answer, Cam, I swear. So what we did at Energy 108 is I started picking up European hits, not just UK, Italy, all the different European countries. I would look at these songs, listen to them going, wow, this sounds great. And that's kind of where the Euro sound came from. There was a pop, dance, Euro sound. And so, that's where we started playing a lot of the Real McCoys and Ace
the
of Base,
Venga Boys.
Venga Boys and all that kind of stuff. But it was really catchy pop stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think where the Capital Sound is a great example, because they basically emulated a lot of these producers in Canada, picked up on, and I would credit Energy 108 for really opening that up, listening to this music going, and remember, technology, this is early 90s, where technology, where you're starting to get into the age of somebody going on a laptop with the right equipment, could, put a production together that sounded like a big studio. Then it was, what did you need? You needed a singer, so you got a good singer.
Right.
You could put the dancey elements together on a laptop. Yeah. And thus you had your sort of dance pop sound.
I was to say, in that era, you also needed the gravelly guy to come in about 2 minutes in and do like the rap.
That's Aqua.
Talk to
there you go. That's it.
So
Come on, Barbie, let's go party.
That's it. That's kind of why I didn't like it, because it was very formulaic. It was pretty
for
easy
sure.
to tell
For sure.
what was going to go down. I mean, I mean, alternative rock in those days was pretty straightforward too. It wasn't, if you weren't Soundgarden or Pearl Jam, you wanted to sound like Soundgarden or Pearl Jam.
Right.
But with that kind of music, that's another thing, especially the Euro stuff.
Yeah.
It's so just, to me, it's just so surface.
Right.
There's no depth to it at all. It's just
the big exception, of course. The White Room by the KLF is still a killer album.
Oh yeah, Stadium. Oh, I thought you were gonna say Robin S, because now Beyonce is like sampling.
Show Me Love.
Show Me Love. Who's finally? That's
because remember, my wife
CC
got
Patterson.
confused, because there's a Robin S with Show Me Love, and there's a Robin with Show Me Love a couple years later. So a lot of confusion there.
Both great songs.
That's a fucking mind blow.
They're both great songs too. That's true.
You know what? You mentioned KLF, and their movement was beyond marketing genius, if you ask me, with all of the Illuminati references.
Moo Land. Yeah.
And KLF got played on CFNY in that era.
I heard
another band who were very good called 808 State, who were, I don't know, Scott, were they a commercial band? Would you call 808 State like the commercial rave stuff? I mean, what would they be?
Yeah, and that, I don't know how much I mentioned this before. Did I mention the New Music Seminar? Because that was a key part of the late 80s. Yeah, so late 80s, this is part of this era, late 80s, early 90s, where, and you could, Manchester, the whole Manchester movement was happening. Right. And these bands were incorporating some dance stuff into their sound. And that, and that's where some of the ecstasy started in the UK. It was coming in like 89, 90. And the Hacienda Club was kind of, epicenter for what was happening, as was, 23 Hop or 318 Richmond in Toronto, which I'll talk about in a second. Right. And so that was going on. And the New Music Seminar, which a bunch of us from CFNY were going to, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, and years beyond that, I believe it kept going. But we would go there, and that's where we'd meet all the people from the UK. And 808 State were one of those bands that were right into, they were an alternative band, but they were really into, the new techno rave culture. And they were one of the pioneers that really started that sound. Were right into what the scene was doing, where it was going. They were, early adopters of that sound.
Like they seem like a band that probably had like top 40 hits in the UK, like that Pacific
Yeah.
State was a pretty big jam, and I feel like a guy called Gerald with Voodoo Ray.
Well, talk
is
about
like another one of
Pacific
those, like,
State.
crossover.
Scott's got a story
Yeah.
about the original extended version of Pacific State.
Oh, Pacific State. No, maybe it's a different one, but that was
808
one of,
State, right? This is
Yep, that is the track Pacific State. But that just goes with that story of those guys.
okay.
And I have got an old interview with them in New York, and those guys were just on fire about the technology. Again,
Okay.
they were one of the guys, the early bands to figure out the technology and use it to their effect, and incorporate alternative mixing in with techno and stuff. They were definitely one of the first bands
Okay.
to do that.
So
Yep.
before I pass the
Name-
mic to my main
Yep.
man brother Bill, I'm hoping Scott could tell us a story about Raving I'm Raving, Shut Up and Dance.
Yeah, so quick story of that. And that came out 91, 92. And this is another story about tracks that producers were doing, purely for the club. Like nobody's thinking about a hit record. Nobody's thinking anything beyond that. This is also, if you remember, early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. This is when sampling was on fire. And nobody had thought it through. Nobody was thinking about the legal ramifications. The lawyers and the labels and all those people didn't know what the fuck to do. It was just basically, when you got an idea, just
Put it
sample
out.
it.
Yep.
Sample a piece of it and just put it out. And
Paul's
it was very,
Boutique.
very, it was
Yeah.
absolutely amazing creative time. And there are people that will argue that, oh, you're ripping it up and it's not original. Like, fuck you.
Yeah,
of course
fuck
it
you.
was original. Right? Because you're taking a small idea, a very small idea, and making it like into something different. And like, who can blame that idea?
No, Public
But it was
Enemy,
just like-
Rebel Without a Pause. Go listen to it, then come back.
Yes. Absolutely. Come on.
Let me jump in here for
Yeah.
a second, because you
Yeah.
mentioned Manchester. We got to talk a little bit about
Oh, yeah.
that, because
Oh, but we got to
shoot
get the
that.
story, then we go to Manchester.
Okay, go
'cause I
ahead.
haven't
Yeah,
passed the mic to
I'll-
brother
yeah.
yet. Okay, so
So,
finish that
I'll-
story, then
okay.
Manchester. Okay.
So funny, they're raving. I'm raving. It's I forget the artist that did it, but it was basically, let's sample, and it was what was the song now? I've forgotten it for a second. The original sample of "Raving I'm Raving" is "Walking in Memphis." Who was the guy?
Mark Cohn.
Mark Cohen, thank you.
Mark
So
Cohen.
uses the piano riff from that,
Right.
and they basically take
It's a
the
great
lyrics and they transfer it into kind of a rave experience. I'm raving, and if when you listen to it, it's so brilliantly done.
Right.
And they add just this really, really strong kick drum, and they add a little bit of break beat, a little kind of jungly break beat behind it, and it's absolutely perfect for the rave scene. And they played it in the clubs, and it's huge in the raves. But what they weren't expecting was it actually took off like crazy. People were buying the record like
Right.
mad,
Right.
and it got to like number 2 in the UK charts. And then, of course, somebody knew somebody who talked to Mark Cohen and said, "Did you hear this?" And he's like, "What the fuck?" And it's like, "Yeah, this is like number 2 in England." And of course, he called his lawyer, and they put a big cease and desist on it. And it was such a kind of landmark
Wow.
case that they actually had to destroy. They had at that point, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of copies of the record, and it's a record at the time. They had to like destroy all the copies, and that's it. No more copies existed. other
Lawyers
than-
ruin everything, Scott.
Yes.
Okay.
And then somebody came out with it. They kind of redid it with somebody
Yeah, a
recreated.
cleared sample. Or whatever.
Yeah. It just
And it's
didn't
never
work.
as good. It's never as
No.
good as that original. That
No.
If I can dig it up on YouTube, 'cause
It's there. Yeah.
Okay, then
Peter Bouncer, I think it is.
Peter Bouncer. Then
Yeah.
people listening to this episode will have already heard it.
It's a great track.
Put on my raving shoes and I boarded the plane. Touchdown in the land where the skies are blue. In the middle of the pouring rain. Everybody was happy. Ecstasy shining down on me. Yeah, I've got a first class ticket. Feeling as good as a boy can be. I'm raving, I'm raving. I'm raving till the sweat just falls out of me. I'm raving, I'm raving. But do I really feel the way I feel? on my raving shoes and I boarded the plane. Touchdown in the land where the skies were blue. In the middle of the pouring rain, everybody was happy. Ecstasy shining down on me. Yeah, I've got a first class ticket, feeling as good as a boy can be. I'm raving, I'm raving. I'm raving till the sweat just falls out of me. I'm raving, I'm raving.
All right, brother, I pass the mic to you.
Sure. So I wanted to talk about a little bit about Manchester because it was a movement that came right at the right time for CFNY because it was at the end of the 80s and it was pre-Nirvana. And so you had this musical movement out of Manchester, England, which was based on dance music for sure. It was based around a club called the Hacienda, which I know New Order was a regular frequenter.
Part owners.
Part owners. There you go.
Yeah.
And there was a drug dealer who worked at the Hacienda who realized that he could put a band together, make some music.
Can I guess?
And maybe get some women. Yeah, go ahead. Who do you think I'm talking about?
Noel Gallagher.
No.
Oh, right.
No, pre-Noel Gallagher. And without his band, there probably wouldn't have been an Oasis. No, I'm referring to a guy named Sean Ryder.
Yep.
So Sean was the lead singer of a band called the Happy Mondays. And he was a drug dealer from the Hacienda, from what the stories I know. And I created the Happy Mondays. And then in 1989, sidetracking them for a second, there was an album that came out by another band out of Manchester called the Stone Roses. And it took the best of indie pop and dance music and combined it. And no one had ever heard that kind of sound before. And the Stone Roses were a legendary band for a number of years, mainly because they wouldn't put out a second album because they had no ideas, apparently. And they got paid a shit ton of money. These were all a bunch of kids that hung around this club. And then along with, and I don't know why I still remember this, Scott, but I always remember you in the Cool as Fuck t-shirt.
Yeah.
Which was a band called the Inspiral Carpets, another Manchester
And that's
band.
where Noel Gallagher got his start.
Yes.
So Noel Gallagher was the drum tech for the Inspiral Carpets.
Right.
So he traveled the world with them and got some ideas, I'm sure, how to create his own band, which became Oasis. And I want to just kind of tie this in. So the Manchester scene was fantastic. There's a great movie called 24-Hour Party People that you should watch.
Yes.
If you haven't seen it, because it features some of the people that were there. And it's a great movie. But anyway, one band we failed to mention, and I think it's important that we do, or DJ group that went under the handle the Chemical Brothers.
Yeah.
And the Chemical Brothers were this duo of DJs who managed to keep themselves on the radio even after Nirvana broke. So, and how they did that is they got people like Noel Gallagher.
Right. Let Forever Be.
On one of their songs, Let Forever Be. So you still remember
Which
it.
sounds a lot like Tomorrow Never Knows. Like,
Right?
listen to that and then go listen to Tomorrow Never Knows by the Beatles.
True. Very true. So I wanted to make sure we mentioned the Chemical Brothers because, you know, they managed to survive the grunge movement, and not a lot of bands did, especially on CFNY. But we played the Chemical Brothers right through, Cam, right through the 90s, basically.
Yeah, because this is a random question for Scott. Just because you're in Burlington, have you ever encountered Gary Whelan from the Happy Mondays, who randomly lives in Burlington?
Alan
now,
Cross's buddy, right?
You're kidding me.
Yeah, Alan Cross is. It's just such a he just moved there with like his wife.
I have no idea.
I heard this from the ongoing history.
Yeah.
Was he the drummer? Who was he?
Yeah, like he was the drummer, and like Alan Cross just mentioned on one of his podcasts.
I heard it too, Cam. I had the same mental note. Yes,
because he moved to Burlington, and one of the guys from Teenage Fan Club moved to Kitchener. Norman Blake.
He had family. He had family in the Kitchener area.
Yeah.
I remember Teenage Fan Club.
The Spoons, of course, Burlington band. I don't know if any of them still live here, but the only other ones I know, Sarah Harmer, who doesn't live here anymore, but her folks live just up the road. And when I do on my little cycling routes, I pass Dead Mouse's house. Dead Mouse lives.
Dead Mouse.
Shout out to Melody. Melanie. What's her name?
Dead Mouse lives just up the road, just north of me. Yeah.
Shout out to Melly
on
Fresh.
the rock side of things too, Jamie Stewart, who was in the Cult, lived in Toronto for many years. I don't know if he still does or not.
Oh, then we could say
were you-
Ashbury's from spent Hamilton. He went to high school in Hamilton.
He
Were
did.
either of you?
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
Were either of you gentlemen at the disastrous Stone Roses gig in Toronto?
Yes.
Like legendary is like one of the worst concerts.
I
of all
heard-
time.
Worst
heard about that,
concert ever.
I wasn't there,
Yeah.
but
Was it really as bad as everyone says it was?
It was
I wasn't there.
horrendous.
It
So
was
the venue
worse.
was the venue was a warehouse that they had put one show on previously that was in excess, and they knew that the sound was awful in this warehouse. It was right down on the docks, and so the sound was awful, just completely awful. But the thing that really pissed everybody off was Ian Brown of the Stone Roses, their lead vocalist, showed up 2 hours late. It was like after midnight by the time they got there, and it wasn't a Friday night. I think it was like a Tuesday or Wednesday. He could not sing a note. He was so hammered. They also couldn't do any of their dancier numbers because for some reason, I guess they didn't have the sampling tracks prepared. So it was just a nightmare of a concert. And and I've been to 2 concerts in my life where the band was booed off stage. One was a band called Discharge at RPM. In the 80s. And then the Stone Roses were booed after they played for half an hour and then they walked off stage. It was brutal. I thought to myself, everybody's going to ask for their money back.
And I heard about some of their other shows in the UK went a bit crazy too.
I think I heard about a recent Liam Gallagher show at the Rebel nightclub or something where he did like 30 minutes and then got booed off or something. Like this happened in the last few years. I think so.
Possible.
I heard this.
Possible.
Before I forget,
Yeah,
just
go,
one
Ken.
band that we haven't mentioned, but this is going to parlay into another, like CFNY Not. Just because this band has a tie-in, I think, to Pandemic Fridays, Utah Saints seem like one of these like UK bands who tried to capitalize on the sound, but like in a very kind of commercial way. But they, Mike, I'm trying to remember, we had some kind of like,
Yeah,
I think
I'll
we
help
played
you.
One of their songs on
The
Pandemic
night the Blue
Fridays.
Jays won the World Series, that crowd noise is in the song.
Yeah, and for some reason
Yeah.
this came up because something
Something
else,
Good.
whatever it's called, something good.
Yeah, something good is the name of the song, right? And it's
Yeah.
their
Something
big
else, the
radio
Kinks or
hit.
something.
Their big radio hit,
Yeah.
and there's like
It's sampled Kate Bush, I believe.
right.
That's
Yes,
right. Yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. Oh, and by the way, shout out to the Orb too. There's a great Orb song with
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, Minnie Riperton's in this Orb song, not Kate Bush. Okay, never mind.
Okay.
But
I thought it was Ricky Lee Jones.
that's the that's the fluffy clouds is Ricky Lee Jones.
Ricky
is,
Lee Jones.
Fluffy.
And
but go ahead.
Orbital is, we're mentioning these
Yeah.
bands again, late 80s, early 90s. Orbital was another band that, were doing electronic music ahead of the curve, doing some very cool stuff.
And we can laugh at them now, but just because we talked about ecstasy earlier, but EMF stood for Ecstasy Motherfuckers, if I remember correctly.
Correct. They will deny
Okay,
that, but, there's stories around, whatever.
They were drug boys. They were. One of them is dead. I think the bass player is dead. He died at like 24 of an overdose.
Unbelievable.
Can I give Scott and Neil? This will be a quiz for you guys, and also a test if you listen to the last toast. That although I was sick with COVID, I did record. I did like a computer voice of my fun facts.
Which was
But this
great.
is one of the fun facts. Okay, and this is gonna parlay into a CFNY Not about 2 bands. But first, a quiz.
Okay.
Do you guys know who wrote the song "Love Sensation" by Lolita Holloway? Who wrote that song?
I certainly know that's one of the legendary most sampled tracks, but you got me on who wrote
It was
that,
written by
but
Dan Hartman.
Get Out. That's awesome.
Yeah, which is
Wow.
very, very random. Who also wrote "Free Ride" for Edgar Winter. Like, talk about range. Anyway,
Wow. Yeah, that almost there's a guy who wrote, and if you Google him, can't think of his name right now. The guy who wrote Thriller and a few other really big
Toto.
R&B.
Steve Lukather.
You have to actually Google him, but and again, you shouldn't judge somebody by a cover, but you look at his picture and you go, he's this nerdy looking guy.
Oh, that's Vincent Price, Scott. Come on, he didn't write it.
Yeah, no, but it's anyway. But I guess he was like a studio kind of songwriter in that, and he wrote some great R&B hits. But he's a really nerdy-looking white guy that you just,
Well, that's when you find out.
That's why he wrote songs.
Yeah, and you find out all the good Christmas songs were written by people of the Jewish faith.
Yeah,
it's all just math. Okay, CFNY Not. Did CFNY play these 2 bands? The
Go.
Lolita Holloway. You can probably guess parlaying into Black Box.
No.
Like
Strike.
Right
Yeah.
on Time? No.
Oh,
that would have
no.
that would have been Beats Per Minute on Sunday. Again,
Okay.
a feature show, and maybe Shep, late at night, but no.
Okay. And the other track, this was a monster jam and a real anomaly for the charts, but I bet CFNY played it. Mars, Pump Up the Volume.
Wow.
Absolutely.
I think so, yeah. Yes.
Huge.
Glad you went there, Cam,
Yeah.
because that's the first song I remember hearing Shep play that was that type of music. That would have been around 87 or 88, I want to say.
I want to say
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah,
Am
I
I
think
wrong? I want to say
I feel like
89?
87.
Was it?
I feel
Maybe.
like it was 87, 86, 87. I'll find out why you guys talk about it.
Well, because
Google
it sampled like Eric B. and Rakim, and like
Yeah.
that was
Thinking of
only
a master
87 or
plan.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Shep used to play that too. Shep used to play he played
I went-
Grandmaster Flash.
87,
He
87.
played Eric B.
Yeah,
and
okay.
Rakim. But there was two songs that came out around the same time. Mars, Pump Up the Volume. Was the other one Steve
Yeah.
Silk Hurley? Was that the song, Scott?
Oh,
Do you
shit.
remember? There were
Oh.
two songs that came out at the same time that were, I guess, technically known as house music.
Yeah, there were definitely, again, pointing to Headley and Shep again because of their huge numbers.
Mhm.
That when they played those tracks, they're like a huge audience. Got to know those tracks and would identify it as a CFNY track. And again, although it's a feature show, it still got played on CFNY, but not a playlisted song per se. And that's where a lot of these feature shows and feature programs, had their own audiences, right? From Ivor's Import show that he played some tracks that weren't in regular rotation, and to Live from London and etc.
But Cam, to answer your question, Mars, Pump Up the Volume was in regular rotation. Absolutely.
I kind of forgot it was a 4AD track, because I think there was a big part of the sample was that band AR Kane, who were like Kevin also ran in the 4AD category or catalog.
Right.
Because it was Ivo Watts Russell and what just like a fascinating for like if you're a music nerd, just the whole backstory of that song and the sample.
That song also
insane.
was a mind blow. I remember like my mind would blow when I heard Mars Pump Up the Volume. Like it just sounded so different from everything else. Yeah. So cool.
And the video was just all like kind of stock footage of like the space program and shit. But the Africa Bambaataa, who's like one of the worst humans. If you know what he's been up to the last 20 years, we won't get into that. Kool and the Gang, Public Enemy, James Brown, the Bar Keys. Like what a sample is their aforementioned Eric B. and Rakim.
That's all from that one song?
Yeah. Because I think they got sued too for like some of these were not.
It was a great sampling time. Everybody was going sampling crazy, and then it's typically when it's it's kind of when the internet and streaming happened, is that laws can't possibly keep up with technology, and all the lawyers are fumbling over each other to try to make sense of it, and then try to get it into law. It just takes forever.
I feel like Cold Cut was like another band, because they did the Eric B. And then all the shit with CFY didn't play Negative Land, or what was that one that the motorcade rides on? What was that? Steinstein?
Oh,
wow!
It was like sampled the JFK like assassination. It was kind of like a sort of a novelty hit, but it was like a dance song.
Don't remember
Have you
that.
written all this stuff down, Cam? Because you're bringing up songs that I haven't remembered in 25 years. I'm like,
good for you.
Oh yeah, that one. Where did that one? I forgot about that song.
Like I think because that was like a very early
and the mass media.
Yeah, like
I think that's what they were called.
Yeah, like it would be like one of the first, like with just all samples. Like it was a real like Anyway,
that's another show.
That's how Cam Gordon got. That's how he got the co-hosting job on Progressive Past of Modern Melodies, because he knows his shit.
Yeah, I feel like Cold Cut. That was the last band on my list. I got Concan. Do we need to go into Lisa Lougheed? I don't know.
No, that's Lisa. Yeah.
Did we drain the swamp? I have a question real quick here. Go ahead.
Quick answer to Lisa Lougheed is like, what I touched on earlier, just about, late 80s, going into the 90s, for Canadian hip hop and R&B, is that you could argue that the artists were out there, But there was
Yeah.
no support from labels, and like there might have been individuals that wanted to support, but there wasn't the infrastructure of the Canadian music scene and the labels and the companies, grew up, on a lot of folk and rock and roll, and trying to get everybody to understand hip hop and that culture. Exactly, Maestro is one of
And
the
that was 89.
Look how young he is.
grandfathers, and that's an anomaly. But just getting that music a chance by labels and the infrastructure to support these people and nurture them and get them on the radio. And a lot of them would argue, well, nobody's playing it on the radio. Well, then that was true. And so it was like it was a fucked up scene. Until Energy came on board. You had the college stations, but Energy came on board, and that pushed it forward a little bit. And we supported urban music, black music that was not getting supported. That certainly helped. But look where we are today.
If you look at the Juno Awards, because when I was going back to do some research on this, like best dance recording of like 92, 93, it would be like the Celine Dion dance remix of Love Can Move Mountains, or Jan Arden, If I Could Be Your Girl dance remix. Like this was the award-winning stuff in Canada.
There was a period of time when that was happening everywhere, wasn't it? They would take rock songs and make dance versions of them.
But it was a start.
Yeah, it worked for Biff Naked, right? She had a big Spaceman.
There you go. Can I tell you a quick story? So I went to Humber College for broadcasting, and I was in English class. We had an English was one of the classes we took, and I was in this classroom with people that were in like journalism and every other different courses, business administration, whatever. There was one girl there that I ended up sitting beside, and this is the late 80s. And she had a song that she had gone into the studio and recorded and did a video, paid for it all herself. And I don't remember her name, but the song was called Let's Talk. And I took it to Chris Shepard and I said, hey, this girl has tried everything to get label interest. And, would you listen to it? Just give me some feedback, what I can tell her, kind of thing. He ended up playing it on his show one Saturday night. He just, I don't know, it wasn't a great song, but it was, it was good enough. And he ended up playing that song. And because Chris Shepard played that one song once, she got label interest. She got much music airplay. It was incredible.
And that woman's name was Candy. And she...
No, it wasn't Candy. No, she went to York University. I wasn't smart enough to go there. So I don't remember her name, but she had a song called Let's Talk and got a lot further down the road. Thanks to Shepard. I just wanted to throw that in.
I'm surprised we haven't talked about Chris Shepard more. I mean, just like a bullseye for all this stuff. I'm trying to remember, when did he like crossover of doing like, I'll just call like original music? Would it be like BKS, like when that band?
Yeah,
like that was his band. Right?
I can speak on that very quickly, and just the time here is I've got about 15 minutes. Guys,
yeah, okay. Let's talk Shepard, and then we'll drain the swamp, and then we'll say goodnight.
Okay. So it's actually funny enough because just I love to do these to this day in history posts, and so 30 years ago, basically 92, while he was still at CFNY, Chris had started BKS, and that was where he so I think the first BKS record was around May or June 92. He had started a compilation, a techno compilation, Shepard's Techno Trip, 1 and 2, both in 92. So that's kind of where he started that. But the BKS project with Shep started in 92. And then after that came Love Inc., which was probably, I'm going to guess, around 94-ish, 93, 94. But yeah, the whole BKS project started with, and it was through a guy at Quality Records, Marcus, who just unfortunately passed away just about a year ago. He kind of put, a couple of session guys. There was Henny Becker, who was doing sort of,
Becker, Kavanaugh, Shepard.
Yeah, exactly. And he put it together, and that's where that started, BKS.
Can I ask a weird question? Like, because Love Inc. was like a very, obviously more mainstream than a lot of the stuff he'd done prior.
Yes.
When I was at McMaster in the late 90s, for example, Love Inc. was like the headliner band during Frost Week, the super rave with Love Inc., even though they were all over Much Music. Do you guys think Shepard found this like artistically fulfilling, like touring across Canada with this? Like, was he into this? Because I just know his tastes were so eclectic, and he really, obviously very passionate about the music, and then moving into just a bit more mainstream, you know, you're touring Canadian campus. I don't know if this would be the goal for like a lot of artists. Like, it might be not beneath them, but just like this, you know, I'm playing McMaster, like, who cares?
Brother, you go first, brother.
Yeah. So my take on Chris Shepard in that era was a guy that knew his time was finite as far as his popularity went. He was getting a little older. And I frankly think that he was, in a sense, and I can't speak for Chris. I can only speak to what I knew about Chris and what a wonderful human being he was too. But I think if I had to,
as far as we know, he's still here.
Yeah, right. He's still going. Sorry about that. Costa Rica somewhere, whatever. Anyway.
Or King City.
I think, to tell you the truth, Cam, at that point, it sort of had become his retirement plan.
Yeah.
To stick around, make as much money as he could with his Love Inc. and even maybe BKS was a little more of a passion project for him. But I think that Love Inc. was just, he wanted to go out on top, and he wanted to be able to not have to work for the rest of his life. And I think that had a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't really a guy that played well with record labels. You know, he would do things to piss people off on purpose because it always drove the brand that was Chris Shepard, you know?
Yep.
So, you know, I mean, there's a lot of things I can say about Shep, some inside information, but his myth is so great that I would never, ever want to spoil that myth.
The man who shot Liberty Valance. It was print the legend. That's what they said. Print the legend.
Print the legend. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
It finally
correct.
came back to me.
And just to add, you know, I'm with what brother's saying, and Chris, if you're listening to this, so I think my take is a couple of different things. I think Chris, you know, quintessential rock star, and an ego that wanted it all, wanted to be able to do it all and be part of it all, and to be bigger than life. Very smart guy, but also, you know, driven by ego and fame. And that also included money. And I think, he definitely wanted the money, but he also wanted the cool too. But he was, you know, there was a side of him that loved both sides, the popularity of being more popular, and that, you know, drove him towards the more pop music and creating that, you know, that side of Love Inc. And his other, you know, persona was Dog Whistle. And he, you know, performed at raves all through this time, playing, you know, the most underground tracks you can imagine, as Dog Whistle, and people were losing their minds because it was Chris Shepard, but he was Dog Whistle. So he had it all. Like, he had it all.
Yeah.
And you know, all the power to him. I
was gonna say, like, a real, like, one of like what he managed to pull off. The only person it's not the same thing what this guy did. The only person who sort of comes to mind having a similar career in Canada, at least, was that guy MC Mario, who had like that whole chain, but like just fucking hammered
I don't
it.
think
but
he.
I don't think it was that it wasn't eclectic like
Chris
that.
had a little more integrity, I'd say.
Yeah, and you know, and Mario didn't have that underground, and like, you know, when we didn't get deep into the rave stuff today, but Chris was at ground zero on the rave scene, you know, and he was, you know, part owner of on the lease anyway at 23 Hop 318 Richmond, which was a club where a lot of the rave scene started and where a lot of people gathered. And Chris was very instrumental in the rave scene and helping it get started and growing it, and, you know, Dog Whistle and everything else. So he was very, very much in the underground, and, you know, that goes through all of the bands that he connected with, and from the Cult to, you know, supporting Beastie Boys when nobody was giving them airplay and all those things. So he was right there, but he also understood fame and loved money, and nothing wrong with that. No disrespect for that.
Let's get Shep on our deep dive into the rave scene.
Yeah.
Good luck finding him.
Well, on that note, so DJ Dwight came over. This is a couple of months ago. DJ Dwight came over, and it was really an interesting conversation, actually. And he kind of promised to get me Chris Shepard on Toronto Mike. He said he knew where he was. He could reach out to him. He says he would get Shep on Toronto Mike. I will just update the FOTMs and say I have not heard back from DJ Dwight. So we still don't know.
He's a good man.
When was the Humble and Fred interview? That was like
2014
years ago now.
2014.
Okay.
Yeah, that might have been the last, public interview.
As far as my research tells me, yes, that was the very last public interview.
I really give him credit for how Subterranean, for a guy who was just so in the limelight for such a long time, has completely gone off the grid.
Kind of what I said, Cam. I mean, I think that was his plan. I was his plan all along to just disappear one day.
The great
Interesting
escape.
is there's another movie I want to drop that's probably my favorite movie of all time, and it's the story of a DJ in Ibiza, Spain, and it's called "It's All Gone Pete Tong."
Yeah.
And Shep's story, although this guy in this movie goes deaf, he's a DJ who goes deaf, which is a great sub story within the story of itself in this movie. Shep kind of reminds me of this guy. Just one day, he all of a sudden just said, "I'm out of here.
Peace out."
And he was gone. And that was it.
Love it.
And
enough.
now we're gone because our time is up. But I will say, I love these progressive past of modern melody episodes. I love that I get to do it with my friends Cam Gordon and brother Bill. And I love that we always have a kick-ass subject matter expert. And there's no one better than Scot Turner. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I will say this quickly, Scott. When we do talk about rave, I want to know one fucking question. I got to throw one question by, and that question is going to be, what was with all the fucking soothers and the fucking glow sticks?
I'll fill you in on that. There's a story behind that.
Fair enough.
I cannot wait for the rave spectacular episode of the progressive past of modern melodies. And that brings us to the end of our 1074th show. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Toronto Mike. Okay, let me see if I can do all this from memory. Brother Bill is at Neil Talks. Apparently his real name is Neil. Neil Talks. Cam Gordon is Cam_Gordon. Don't forget the underscore. You'd think he could pull strings at Twitter and get Cam Gordon, but he has to be _Gordon.
I'll DM Elon, see what he can do.
When's the edit feature coming?
I don't want it. I don't want it.
Okay.
I don't want it.
All right.
Now,
Yeah,
Scott,
Mike's the decider.
I don't want it. At
Okay.
Scot Turner is interesting because there's only one T in Scott, but there's a T in Turner, so there will be two T's there, but not three. So figure that out, okay? That's how you find him. Okay. Our friends at Great Lakes Brewery are at Great Lakes Beer. Palma Pasta is at Palma Pasta. Sticker U is at Sticker U. Doer are at Doer Performance. Ridley Funeral Home are at Ridley FH, and Canna Cabana are at Canna Cabana _. See you all next week.